he would cry out, but his fellow prisoners would respond harshly, asking him to shut up his mouth. At night, he would have recurring nightmares, screaming for help over and over again, but no one cared to listen to him. Once upon a time, a young boy named Chude lived in a small community named Hanifa, known to be one of the most peaceful among its neighboring communities. It was nicknamed the town where love was born because everyone there lived their lives showing kindness, love, compassion, and generosity to people around them. Every evening, the members of Hanifa would gather around the village square, sitting by a fire, sharing their dinner amongst each other while listening to tales from different elders about the history of their village, moonlight tales, and sometimes horror stories to scare the children in their midst. Chude and his older brother Chike shared a blissful childhood in Hanifa. They often ran around in their shorts, laughing loudly as they playfully chased after lizards and built sand castles. Their childhood was laced with love, care, and core memories were embedded in their minds. One day, while Chude and a few other kids were playing and building sand castles near the outskirts of the village, he got distracted by a reflecting light, not realizing that this was a trick. Chude was kidnapped by a group of ruthless bandits who were known for atrocious acts of violence all through the communities nearby. His cries for help went unheard as he was whisked away into the unknown, leaving his family and friends behind, their hearts heavy with grief and fear. Chude was locked up in a cage with other children. For the first few months, the cage was loud from screams of children crying out for help. But as time passed, it became quiet and quiet and quiet, with fewer voices heard except Chude, who was very consistent with his cries. Chude's world had changed, but for a 6-year-old, he really couldn't understand what was happening around him. All he wanted to do was play with his brother Chike. He would call out to his brother several times, hoping he would return from an errand, maybe.
Chike! Chike, where are you? Chike, please come! Chike, I'm sorry for kicking your sand castle. I won't do it again. Chike, where are you? Chike!
He would cry out, but his fellow prisoners would respond harshly, asking him to shut up his mouth. At night, he would have recurring nightmares, screaming for help over and over again, but no one cared to listen to him. It was every boy for himself. Soon, their training as child soldiers began. Every day was a survival test for every boy who had been kidnapped and taken prisoner. They were trained to see each other as opponents and fight out every situation. Under the scorching sun, Chude had to lift heavy objects from one point to the other, just like everyone else. Anyone who dared defy the rules set out was severely punished. One time, when one of the boys had tried to escape and failed, his pinky finger was cut off as a warning to everyone who had thought of escaping in the future. As the days passed, the boys endured brutal training. They were forced to fight each other in a wrestling game just to entertain onlookers who would place bets while they fought. Those who lost their matches were subjected to starvation, a cruel reminder of the consequences of failure. When Chude finally entered his first match, he was pitted against a much older boy, putting him at a disadvantage. As he stood in the ring, confused by the crowd around him, he didn't know what he was supposed to do until he was handed the very first punch to his face. Despite his efforts to defend himself, he lost the match and would have to fight many more matches shortly and lose them. After a fierce match that injured him severely, Chude sat in the corner crying and consumed with anger and frustration. Then, a boy named Amaka approached him, offering him food that he had snuck out.
You're wasting your time trying to attack from the beginning of the fight. If this one very fast to get your energy, I have to go before someone sees me giving you food.
From that day on, Amaka took Chude under his wing, treating him like a baby brother and training him on everything he knew during the practice session. By his next match, Chude, although still beaten up, had significantly improved, as he had less bruising from applying everything he had learned from Amaka. Chude grew stronger, eventually getting him his first win. As they got older, both boys were tasked with training the newer prisoners and sometimes raided villages, taking their supplies, beating people up, and even kidnapping young boys from their homes. Wrestling and active violence had become a norm for them. It had become the life that they knew now, and it became a routine. Chude had gotten so violent that he would sometimes even bully other boys who were struggling to find their footing in this new environment. He hardly had a smile on his face except for when he had chat and ran errands with Amaka, whom he considered his best friend. By the time Chude turned 15 years old, he had become one of the best wrestlers in the camp. As every other day, as Chude would, he prepared himself for his next match, waiting patiently to see his opponent. Unfortunately, he discovered that his opponent was his very best friend, Amaka. In disbelief, he tried to forfeit, but Jaguar, the head of the bandit, threatened to shoot him down if he stepped foot out of the ring. This match, you see, was heavily betted on, and people from far and wide had come to witness it. As the match unfolded, it became one of the most prolonged fights in wrestling history. Both boys battled fearlessly, sustaining multiple injuries, blackened eyes, broken wrists, broken noses. Both boys cried and apologized as they exchanged one punch after the other. By the end of the fight, they were both unconscious and carried out by others as they could no longer walk. Chude woke up in pain a few hours later, but Amaka remained unconscious for an additional week. When Amaka finally regained his consciousness, he was so weak and barely had energy.
I'm sorry, Amaka.
It's not your fault. Be strong, my friend. If you want to make it up to me, find a way to escape this place. This isn't life. It's a prison disguised as a home. Leave before it consumes you.
Tragically, Amaka succumbed to his injuries and passed away, leaving Chude empty and broken. However, he was not allowed to mourn. He was not allowed to cry over his friend's death, as Jaguar reminded him, "Man up! People die every day. He won't be the first." Embodied with grief and guilt, Chude tried to carry on with his life. One evening, after emerging victorious in a match and finding himself alone with his thoughts, he wept bitterly, his hand striking his chest with anguish. Each tear that fell represented the loss he had experienced. He wished he had taken Emeka's place and left this cruel, ugly, wicked world. Years later, Chude had grown up into a fine young man and progressed into one of the high-ranking bandits. From time to time, they would go to villages far in the east to ransack villages and kidnap more boys to add to the wrestling ring. One day, when Chude found himself on one of these raids, things went south. They had walked into a trap by the vigilante group searching for the bandit hideout. Many bandits were injured. Some left dead. An injured and disoriented Chude managed to escape. But days later, he found himself in a strange room, far from the bandit camp.